Welcome back to 4Community, creating community spaces where you can connect with others and you can connect with God. Totally looking forward to connecting this week, Sunday in particular, or anytime you want to connect on Zoom. We're meeting on Sundays at 10:30. You're welcome to join us if you're tuning in and you're not joining us in community yet. I'll even create a special space just for you. Hey kids, remember, keep your eye on the background because there are characters hidden in the background just for you, because we want to hear from you when we meet together on Zoom so you can tell us what characters that you saw. So keep your eyes open and make sure you talk to us next time we meet. I've got a different, interesting topic, I think, for today that we can discuss together the next time that we meet. I want to talk about followership and incompatibility and what that means in relationships. And I want to start with the question, how do you know if it's more healthy to end the relationship than it is to keep the relationship? Are you feeling that? Let me kind of open it up just a little bit more. You're in a relationship with somebody, you've been in this relationship for a long time, and you're working hard in that relationship, and nothing seems to be changing. You're the one that needs to do all the changing. The other person won't do any changing at all. You're the one kind of taking all the hits, and the other one's just being grumpy about it. You're the one doing all the sacrificing, the other person's sacrificing nothing. Have you seen that kind of relationship? I've seen some of those relationships. So how do you know when you've reached a time when, okay, so I'm giving and giving and giving and giving. I'm changing, and this relationship is going nowhere. When is it time for a necessary ending? Or, I've also seen in other cases where people are hostile towards somebody else, where they're kind of abusive, where they're kind of oppressive. When do you know it's time to stop turning the other cheek and to start running away? When, because one of the phrases that Jesus says in the New Testament is, when somebody strikes you on one cheek, turn the cheek and let them strike you in the other one. Just an attitude of love and forgiveness, and not jumping to some sort of activity that's quite hostile. It's just, start by loving, start by forgiving, and try to figure stuff out first. But how do you know when you've turned the other cheek enough and you've been hit on the cheek enough that, okay, now it's time to close the door and end this relationship? No more turning the cheeks. As Dr. Henry Cloud might say, now it's time for a necessary ending. How do you know? Well, that's the text that we're kind of looking at today from a different perspective. In the text today, we're looking at Mark chapter 2, verses 18 to 22. And in this text, this is where the beginning of the subplot happens about what Jesus is going to do with the temple cult. So in the Old Testament, God did something wonderful by setting up a wonderful people, setting up the nation of Israel and the Jews, and we see the story all through the Old Covenant. And unfortunately, we see how that didn't work out. And it wasn't because anything was wrong with the covenant; it's because you and I are just not great rule keepers. Humanity can't keep rules. I break rules all the time. We can't muster up. And so Jesus is like, yeah, I know. So I'm going to come and I'm going to be one of you. And I'm going to offer salvation by dying on the cross for you and doing all of the stuff that you can't do. I'm going to do all of that. So place your faith in me. I'm going to love you and I'm going to give you forgiveness. That's the new covenant. The old covenant continued to transition into something that by the time we hit the New Testament, by the time we hit the Gospel of Mark, we call it the temple cult. If you go to commentaries, it's going to be referred to as the temple cult, because it's not exactly what God set up in the Old Testament. It certainly wasn't what it was meant to be, and yet they were functioning as though it was. And so it's referred to as the temple cult. And in the temple cult, we see mostly the Pharisees and the religious teachers of the law. We see those people referred to as from the temple cult. It came to blows. And so in this text today is the very beginning of the subplot about what Jesus is going to do to end the relationship between God and the temple cult. I'm not going to read the whole text, Mark chapter 2, 18 to 23. It does start kind of weird, though. The Pharisees come up to Jesus and say, Jesus, why aren't your disciples fasting? John's disciples fasting, but you're not fasting. Jesus, we recognize what John's religious behavior is. And we can see that John's disciples have like religious-itis. And we get that, and we like that. We like the religious stuff. We like the tradition stuff. We like the stuff that we're in control of. But Jesus, I don't see any of that going on with your disciples at all. Because Jesus isn't trying to do something old. Jesus is trying to do something new. The Pharisees didn't want something new. They wanted something that they could be in control of. They wanted to be in control of Jesus. So Jesus in chapter 2, verse 21 and on, he, in responding to the Pharisees trying to impose their style of relationship on God, Jesus says this: "Who would patch old clothing with new cloth? The new patch would shrink and rip away from the old cloth, leaving an even bigger tear than before. And no one puts new wine into old wineskins, for the wine would burst the wineskins, and the wine and the skins would both be lost. The new wine calls for new wineskins." This is a really complicated text, and it's a complicated beginning of the storyline where it leads us to the rejection of the temple cult. But we're going to break it down a little bit more simpler here. And I want to talk about followership. You know, when somebody has followed Jesus and they have the mindset of a follower, they've got a mindset of humility, and they want to really lean into that friendship with God and embrace a system all about loving God first and loving others second. Followership looks like something specific, and it looks like a healthy friendship. So I want us to look at followership from 3 different perspectives so we can understand the kind of relationship that God is trying to establish with us and the kind of relationship that the Pharisees were trying to control. And hopefully by the end of the talk today, you and I are going to understand a little bit better than we do now, but when it's time to close a relationship and end a relationship rather than continue to work on it. First of all, I want to say that followership is alien. It's foreign. It's exotic. It's something that we're not used to seeing. You know, the system that God wants to establish on the earth and has established on the earth is a system of love. The entrance into that system of love, which the Bible refers to as the kingdom of God, the entrance into the kingdom of God, the system of love, is through faith and forgiveness. We place our faith in Jesus, and when we do that, we receive forgiveness from God. It's not about living up to rules. It's not about performance. It's not about me being able to offer anything to God, you being able to offer anything to God because we're great somehow. It's about God offering us everything. God wants to forgive us, and he's offering us this friendship, and he says, would you please, just to simplify it, would you please be my friend, basically. And in order to become a friend of God, you and I follow Jesus. We choose to receive and place our faith in him, and then we choose to live as a friend of him. And what does that look like? It looks like we love God first and we love others second. That's what it looks like. That's not what the Pharisees had in mind, though. It's not what the temple cult had in mind. The system that the temple cult was putting in place was real oppression. It was a one-down relationship where the Pharisees were allowed to create all the rules and everybody else had to do all the changing. That if they ever were seen to be wrong, it was the other people that needed to change. In this one moment in the text here, we see the Pharisees coming at Jesus, and Jesus is offering everybody love and forgiveness. And the Pharisees say, oh no, look what you're doing. You're doing something new, and we can't control that. We want to control that, and so therefore you have to go back and do something old. Look at what John the Baptist is doing. Look at what his disciples are doing. That's the right thing. That's a system that we can control. That's a system that we can recognize. We don't recognize what you're doing. We don't get this whole lovey-dovey forgiveness kind of thing. We don't forgive. So the Pharisees had a very oppressive relationship that they were trying to impose onto everyone. That's not the system of God, man. The system of God is about love and forgiveness. It's about loving God first and loving others second. So followership. What does it mean to follow Jesus? Well, first of all, it's alien. There's not a lot going on planet Earth that we can kind of hang our hats and say that's what followership truly looks like, because we don't see a lot of unconditional love happening in the world right now. Particularly in North America. Like in North America, we had a really peaceful existence on the outside, on the surface level, not underneath, for a long while, I would think. But then all of a sudden, over the last few months, the world's gone mad, right? Like everything that was underneath the surface, all the toxic waste that was just right underneath the surface has bubbled up to the surface now, and now it's a madhouse out there. What we're seeing right now in the system of the world, things are just not working. What do we need? We need the system that Jesus comes. We need the kind of relationship and forgiveness and compassion and equity and equality that Jesus brings with him. That's what we need right now. That's the kind of relationship we need. We don't need the kind of relationship the Pharisees are trying to impose on people, saying, here's the rules, I'm better than you, and if it looks like I'm wrong, it's not the case. You're the one that needs to do the changing to satisfy what I believe is right. Totally unhealthy system. So followership is foreign. It's alien. We don't see it a lot in this world. Second of all, followership is a commitment. So not only is it something that we don't see a lot of in this world, followership, what it means to truly follow Jesus and be in relationship with Jesus, it's a commitment, man. The crowds that had started following Jesus at this particular point in Mark, they were following Jesus because they wanted a show. Jesus had become an attraction. Jesus had become this thing that they went to, and he's got some magic tricks that he does. He's got the magic miracles, and people kind of get healed, and people are coming to Jesus expecting to be entertained. And that's totally not what Jesus was offering. Jesus was offering a friendship, and people were missing it. But friendship is commitment based, right? If I'm going to be a friend with someone, there's got to be some level of commitment there. There's got to be some level of, me not doing things to my friends that's going to hurt them, but me doing things to and with my friends that's going to bring us together to sustain the relationship and even grow the relationship, right? And that's what we're talking about. Followership is commitment. It's leaning into a commitment with Jesus. That's totally not what the Pharisees are doing here. Instead of leaning into a commitment, the Pharisees are saying, I'm not committed to you. You've got to commit yourself to me. I'm not committed to doing things the way that you want to do things. You need to commit. I'm not even going to meet you halfway, the Pharisees would say. You need to commit to the way that I want to do things. Very, very unhealthy stance for a relationship. It lacks humility. It lacks love. It lacks personal sacrifice. It's a horrible system that the Pharisees were trying to impose on Jesus. Thirdly, followership is new. When you and I choose to follow Jesus, there's a real turning. At one point we weren't following Jesus and we weren't living as his friend, and suddenly we are following Jesus now, and now we're starting to think, what does it mean to be a friend of God? What does it mean to live in alignment with Jesus? What does it mean to live my life in a way, and your life in a way, that won't be like slapping Jesus in the face with every action that we take, saying, indicating by our actions that we really don't want the relationship with God, right? What does that look like? It looks new. It looks like a new start. It looks like a fresh start, where we stop doing the things that we used to do that would sort of break a relationship, and now we start doing things that's going to help the relationship. I want you to think about what this means about the temple culture for a moment. I know that we're nowhere near this in the gospel at this point, but coming up is going to be that moment where Jesus says this mountain is going to be cast into the sea. It's a reflection that the temple cult the relationship has come to a necessary ending because it's just not working out. Jesus is trying to create a system of love and forgiveness. And entrance in that system is by faith. And the system that the Pharisees are trying to impose on Jesus, is a system that's saying, you have to do it my way, you have to do all the changing, we're right, you're wrong. It's a top-heavy approach. Jesus says our two systems are incompatible. We can't cooperate with one another. And what he's saying is, if there's no newness, if there's no willingness to leave the old behind, if there's no willingness to say, I'm going to stop treating you the way that I used to treat you, and I'm going to start treating you, and I'm going to show you that I'm treating you differently, then this isn't going to work. We have two incompatible systems here. The system of the temple cult and the system of God that he has established in the world based on love, incompatible. So he says, the kind of relationship that you want, Pharisees, is like old wineskins. And the kind of relationship that I want is like new wine. I can't put the kind of relationship that I want into the old system that you're showing to me. Jesus is saying basically to the Pharisees. He's saying, my system, Jesus says, is a system of love, where I love on people, they love me, and then we all also love each other, and we also love the people on the outside of the system. That doesn't fit into your model, Pharisees, because your model is so constricting that you've got this top-down thing. Everybody's in a one-down position before you. You get to set all the rules. You're very inflexible. Everybody else is wrong. You're right. It just doesn't work. And so Jesus says, he's going to say when we get close to the temple that this is a necessary ending. It's time to break this off. Followership needs to start with new. And this is the new that I'm talking about. At some point, we come to a conclusion. We say, okay, God is real. Jesus is real. And, we admit as well that we don't really see a lot of really great examples of followership in the world. We don't really see a lot of perfect examples or any perfect examples of what it really means to be a Christian in the world, because we all got it wrong, man. We all do wrong stuff all the time. But we would acknowledge that, yeah, Jesus, you are real. Jesus, you're right, I'm wrong. And Jesus, whoever you are, the authentic you, I want to be an authentic follower of you. And I'm going to look at all of the examples that I see of poor Christian examples in the world, and I'm going to forgive them of their poor Christian examples, because I know that I want to be a follower of you, and I'm probably going to give a poor example in some ways as well. So in humility, Jesus, I'm going to say, yes, I want to follow you, and then I'm going to live as your friend, and I'm going to live by loving you, and I'm going to live by loving others. And that's the new start, where we give up our old system and our old way of doing things. We start doing things new. How do you know when it's time to end a relationship? How do you know when it's healthiest to end a relationship? Well, I don't personally know that exact moment, but I do know that there are some signs that you can look forward to. You can look for an incompatibility of systems, for one, an incompatibility of values. You know, when we see here with the Pharisees, their imposition on Jesus, the top-down approach, Jesus had to do all of the changing, and the Pharisees had to do no changing. Jesus was loving, and the Pharisees were not, all about rules. And just a complete incompatibility when it comes to real healthy relationships that you really want to work on. You really want to make sure there are shared values there. And man, the Pharisees and Jesus absolutely did not have shared values. And the Pharisees were getting grumpy. We're going to see that the Pharisees are actually going to become really abusive. And Jesus says, you know what? It's time for this relationship to end. Not only are you not a blessing to me when we're in a relationship, you're also not a blessing to anybody else. It's time for this relationship to end. Sometimes we think that God is just all loving, that he's going to accept and embrace anybody, you know, and there is some truth to that God is all loving and he does accept and embrace everybody. But you know what? A relationship with God is conditional. You got to meet the conditions. And that condition is you need to be humble enough to say, okay, Jesus, I believe in you, and I'm going to receive you, and I'm now going to follow you. I mean, that's the condition of the relationship. The condition of the relationship with God, so that you can become a friend of God, say that you are a friend of God, and sort of in the kingdom, is faith in Jesus. It just starts right there. That's the condition. It's not about your performance. It's about that. I don't know if you're in a relationship that requires a necessary ending or not. I don't have a clue. I know that Jesus and the temple cult was a relationship that had to have a necessary ending. But I do know that if you're in a relationship and you feel that you're doing all the work, it's a one-down relationship, the systems are incompatible, the values are incompatible. Therapists are wonderful. Go find yourself a therapist. Go find yourself some friends and be a listener and see what they have to say about it. Because there are some times when the system clashes are just so much that it's time to say, no, this is just too much. I would be a healthier person if we're not in friendship. And that's not wrong. That's not evil. It's just recognizing that there is a values clash, just incompatible. As I close this Bible talk off, let me just encourage you that relationships are really crazy, really hard. You don't have to walk them alone. Make sure you have a couple of friends along the ride with you. Make sure you lean into a pastor if that's who you got, a therapist, a counselor if that's who you got. We don't have to do relationships with anybody alone. So if you need help, reach out and get some help. I wish relationships were easy, but they're totally not, are they? Here, let me leave you with a closing thought about the Bible passage today. Would you please start with something new? Would you please start with Jesus and do something new? Our relationship with God is based on the one condition, that you place your faith in Jesus and then become a follower of Jesus. And when you become a follower of Jesus, you come into a system based on love, where you love God first and you love others second. If you have not chosen to do that yet, would you please choose to place your faith in Jesus? If you're not part of a community yet, can I please encourage you to join 4Community, where we create community spaces so you can connect with others and also with God. We love making new friends. I love making new friends. Okay, that's it from me for now.